Welcome to the podcast from Stress to Success Blueprint, and I'm your host, Lolita Gurin. And today is a super exciting day for me because I have Chas Wilson as a guest. And if you're wondering, who is this guy? Well, he's a CEO and the founder of Master Networks. How do we know each other? And Wilson Leadership, a best-selling author with another book coming up, which probably going to be also best-selling, and a business mentor for over 20 years of experience. And what does he do? He helps entrepreneurs overcome obstacles and succeed in various industries. Okay. It's not like you think, oh, this is only about like business or something. You could be a coach, you could be a teacher, you could be anyone. And his focus is on leaving lasting legacy beyond business success. Because as you know, it's great if you have great projects with your name on it. But if let's say people didn't like you as a person, they're probably not going to follow you no matter what you do.
Right.
So thank you for being here and welcome.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's my honor to be with you and those listening.
So, I me as a coach, that has to do with a lot of stress management and burnout. When I tell my clients that they need to manage their time and energy, and I give them advice of what they need to do, they immediately tell me, I don't have time for this. And, I know you're a very, very busy person. And so, how did you find time for doing things that you like and not to become burnout at the end of the day?
Yeah, it's really hard. Thank you for the question. It's a good question. One of the first things I have to do is retrain my mind to think about it, that I'm always trying to make sure I'm productive and not just busy. I think specifically for entrepreneurs, there's plenty of things to be busy, right? I can be busy all the time. I can always fill space, fill time, but how can I be productive? How can I find things to do that are productive? And how I manage that is, to be honest, I love business. I love the things that I'm doing. Not all the time, and there's some things I don't really enjoy about business, but for the most part, the impact that I can make, the connections I can make with wonderful people like you and those listening, that fills me up. That drives me. And so I sometimes watch people who try to escape, right? They're running from their business, they're running out to something else to find something else to do. For me, I'm, you know, I hate to break it, but I'm going to be very boring, to be honest, as a person. I mean, I do some amazing things. Yes, I have amazing friends and family and all that, but it's very, very disciplined and dialed in. So the way that I do that is just being passionate and enjoying what I'm doing, so I don't feel like I always have to escape it. Does that make sense?
Do you have any time management apps or do you follow calendar? There's some people who like, wow, the alarm went off and I already know what I'm doing and my
Uh-huh.
calendar, and you need to do one of those. So you,
Yes, I'm very disciplined to my calendar. If I showed it to you, it'd probably overwhelm you. But like, so for instance, I always have this rule. It's like if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist, right? So I can't, I'm not gonna do it if it's not on my calendar. Which is interesting because, a couple of years ago, I remember I read what was the book, like the 4 Hour Work Week. It's like, and I had a buddy who had a business. He's like, I never work on Fridays. I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. I want to try that. So I would clear that space. I'd have that, white space on my calendar completely open for Fridays. And I remember telling my wife, hey, good news. I'm going to be home all day Friday. And she's like, okay, so, that was for me like, okay, that's how I'm going to do it. I quickly found out though that number one, my anxiety went up a little bit because I'm like, I feel like I should be working, but I'm taking the time off. And now the other thing I found too is that my wife was like, she's like, well, I don't understand. Like, do you need me to, like, are we going to do stuff all day Friday, or can I go out with my friends? Because I remember one time I was like, hey, cool. You want to go to lunch today? She's like, no, I have plans. I was like, hey, but it's Friday. I'm home. And she's like, well, okay, so what's the rules here? What are we agreeing to? Because it like dawned on me. I'm like, of course she has her own things going on, right? She has her own things. And then I found that like, um, I just struggled with this time off thing. And so I remember listening to a podcast, and it said or in the book, the audiobook, and it said, if you want to meet the devil, have white space on your calendar. And I was like, well, that's interesting because, it's like I tell my kids to be busy too, and they have nothing to do and they're sitting around, they get into video games or they do other things, right? Kids can do that. Well, it's no different for us as entrepreneurs, as business leaders. Like I just found that that didn't work well for me. So I think the thing for everyone listening is you got to find what works for you. For me, being productive, being engaged in the things I love to do, like writing my new book, those types of things actually do me well as an individual and relieve stress, not add to it. So it's going to be different for everyone, but I found that just taking a bunch of time didn't work. And I'm really, really like dialed into that. And I'll talk about this in a second. But like with the calendar, it's all about the agreements that I make with those around me, right? Not the expectation, but the agreements. So I have certain agreements around my calendar, when I start, when I end the day, etc. And I remember jokingly one time my wife, I was looking on my calendar and it said, take out the trash. It was like it was on my calendar. Why? Because if it's on my calendar, it will happen. If it's not, it probably won't happen. Right. So yes, I'm very long answer, but I'm very disciplined. I follow my calendar. I don't really use timing apps because to be honest, um, the calendar is so dialed in per um, per meeting. And listen, not every meeting needs to be a half an hour just because your calendar says, or defaults to 15 minutes or 30 minutes. Like you can have a 10-minute meeting, you can have an 8-minute meeting, and then hold to that time. So those are just a couple things that I do.
I when I talk with my clients first, I say they need to put themselves on a busy schedule, especially those who are struggling with stress and burnout. Do
Yeah.
you put yourself in a schedule since you even schedule trash taking out?
Do I put myself like me? Yes. So like every morning I go to the gym. One of the things that's interesting for me to balance is like, so I have 5 children and varying in ages, and now my oldest two are out of the house now, but the other three are in high school, and so activities and different things. And my wife worked as a nurse for a long time, and so she did overnights, and so her schedule, like she likes to stay up late. I like to go to bed early. I like to get up early. Um, and so mixing that up with kids and activities, and sometimes it's tough for me to have a regular dialed in time to go to bed. It can vary some nights. And so what I've had to learn for myself is how can I go, okay, you know what, tomorrow I actually need more sleep than I actually need to be at the gym. Like I got to weigh that out. Maybe because I'm getting older too. But whereas when I was young, I could just go and burn it, burn that oil all day long and didn't matter if I slept. It's not so much anymore. But yeah, so for me, I schedule that time. I block it. In fact, my business partner here, I'm usually like, hey, I'm not going to be in the office till 9 o'clock, sometimes 9:30, and I don't take appointments typically before 10 because I need that time in the morning for me. This is for me. Some people like to get going and they start really early. Um, so I start early, but it's reading, reading scripture, study, prayer, to the gym. I'll also listen to audiobooks while I'm at the gym. I then when I'm at the gym, I send text messages out in the morning to people that I'm thinking about, I have gratitude for. I schedule those texts to go out during the day, and then go home and cold plunge, and then shower, get ready, and come here. And that's the discipline I need to keep my energy high because I have a lot of demands throughout the day. And if I miss that, if I struggle through that in the morning, I can tell during the day for sure.
Do you take breaks during the day and how long are they?
Do I take breaks? No, I'm not very good at that. I should. I do though in the middle of the day typically take a few minutes to eat. I there was a lot of years I didn't. I just sort of like ate while I was working and kind of do that. But I have found that I need that. I need to sort of step away, take a few minutes to eat. Um, I'm fortunate this office that I have here that I'm in is less than like a half a mile from my house, which is awesome. So I bought this building. Um, and so I can run home. I run home and eat. I let my dogs out. I sit on my patio. I have a beautiful pool and it's beautiful weather. I can sit there and just, you know, take a step out because I think that's important for my battery to recharge. So when I come back, I can like hit the ground running again. And yeah, so but that's about the only break I take. I probably should take more, but I don't I don't know. I just don't take more breaks than that.
So when I was studying a lot about the brain work, it says even if you take in that, I recommend to all the listeners who are listening in or have never heard of me saying that first, I recommend taking 1 minute every hour. So you can take the
Mm.
phone and put your alarm on, and then whatever it rings, if it's safe, you just can close your eyes, just breathe in, breathe
Yeah.
out, and just take 1 minute, and that already recharges your brain of like, oh, you can be more productive instead of just going long, long time. Although, in addition to that, I always say it's very important to find what works for you because we cannot I say stress management should not be stressful. So we should not
Yeah.
do something that works for somebody else, but may not even work for us. So I'm very happy to hear that, you found your happy and that works for you, even if you do not take breaks, because it also makes sense when you do something that you really love doing it. And another thing I recommend everyone is to do something that you like doing at least for 10-15 minutes. For
Mm.
those people who think, oh, I just hate this and that, but I have to do it. And it what comes to productivity, and I totally relate to when you say, you love writing your book. I noticed when I was writing my first book many years ago now, probably eight, I was working all day mentally doing something that I didn't like doing it. But at the end of the day, I was like, okay, now I'm gonna sit down and write my book. And like within 30 seconds, there was this energy just appeared, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in the jam. This is going. And that's when I realized, doing something that you love doesn't have to be, you have to walk the dog, in the park, or take the meditation, or take a bubble bath. Could be something that really makes your heart sing, that has to do with, writing a
Yeah.
book or producing videos, all those amazing things that you are doing it for entrepreneurs and to help us. So I totally see how you can be very happy and healthy and still doing all of that and productive, because you allow yourself to be in that space and do things that you really like doing it.
Yeah, it's so interesting too. You think about like all the things you just said, and I sometimes think like why is it that I get so much energy from some things and not from others? And one of the things that I've learned is that when I am creative, right, it's also the way I feel that I'm using the gifts from God the best that I can, because he's the creator. He created. And so when I'm in creation, I feel close, like I feel a connection there. And so I feel like my energy is coming through because I'm creating. I'm doing something productive in the world. And so for me, it gives me energy. It doesn't really take that out from me. I've even found on days where my energy is low, as soon as I can get into something creative, like you said, the energy pops up. So yeah, it's so interesting. We'll go on vacation, and my wife is like, and it's not good or bad. It's just different, right? Like she would love to, lay out on the beach kind of a thing, and I'm like, I'd rather go somewhere without distraction and read a book. Like that. That's just like my thing. Why? Because it's creative. I can think. I can get into that sort of creative energy. And so it's just knowing yourself and knowing where you get that energy from and what takes energy from you.
I think what I like about whatever I'm in this creative jam is, well, like creating videos I produce every day. I have a podcast under 10 minutes, of doing video. And no matter how tired I could be like at 11:30, I'm still
Yeah.
gonna make a video for tomorrow, because I like doing that, which I realize I like serving. I like
Mhm.
helping people. So as long as it comes from the heart or comes from, whatever we put the label on, as long as it comes for the better good and helps us to feel good. That's,
Yeah.
I think we will be all such a happier place if we will allow ourselves to do what we want to do. But just continuing to this, I met a lot of people that, I tell them, hey, how about you will do those things, maybe 10-15 minutes, and I get back of saying, well, I really would like to just, walk around the block for 15 minutes, but I have a family and I have friends, and there's no way for me to do it. Like, no, 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 you don't understand. So, what advice can you give for someone who has this mentality of thinking, I would love to do what I want to do, but he wouldn't let me or she wouldn't let me?
Mm. Well, first of all, that's only because you allow it and there's an agreement behind it. So, for example, um, one of the things that's really important in my home with wife, we're gonna be married 25 years, five children, all these companies, et cetera, is we have to operate on agreements, right? Not just expectation. What are the things we can agree upon? And we have several of them. And one of those agreements, for me is I have that space in the morning to get up to go to the gym and start my morning. For my wife, there's an agreement around in the evening time. She likes to do certain things, watch certain shows, do certain things in the evening, be with the kids, et cetera. And so I'll participate in that. But after the kids go to bed, and this was more so when they were littler, now they're big in high school and have activities. But when that was done, I could then, hey, check in with her and agree I could get back to something creative, maybe write in the book for an hour or something like that, before I went to bed. But But to say that someone else, the only reason that happens is if you're allowing them to dictate to you what you can do, what you can't do. But what I've found is that, what I focus on expands, and my priorities show up on my calendar. So for example, when I'm coaching somebody too, and one of the first things they'll say is, well, I don't have time to do that. I don't have time to do this, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. It's like, show me your calendar, pull it up. Let's look at your calendar, because your calendar reflects what you prioritize, what you hold important to yourself. For example, just another one, I've been doing this thing for a long time. So in the morning, when I get to the gym, I'll pull out my phone, and I'm usually on the bike, and I just sort of meditate and think about, a sense and a space of gratitude. And I start thinking of people, like, who comes to my mind. And sometimes it's really random. God, I haven't talked to that person in 4 years, but it doesn't matter. And I'll reach out and I'll just text them and say, hey, I was thinking about you this morning, at the gym, and just want to tell you how much I appreciate you, stuff like that. And I'll send 4 or 5 of those almost every day. What I really like about, and I always get shamed because I don't have an iPhone, but I have a Google phone. You can schedule your text messages to go out during the day. So I do that. Yeah. So I schedule them out during the day. And then when I've talked to people about doing this, like, I don't have time to do that every day. I'm like, you do have time if you prioritize it. What's important to you shows up. Um, for me, going to all of my kids' sporting events, no matter what's going on, has been important to me. I've missed very few over the last 2 decades of kids' youth sports. I've coached most of their sports. Why? Because that's important to me, and I made a priority to make that happen. If it's important to you, and I'll asterisk and caveat this, is that yes, there are times and seasons in life where chaos and crisis can hit. People go through health issues or whatever. But barring those things aside, putting those aside, barring any of those issues, I think it's what you prioritize is how it shows up on your calendar. And don't let anyone else dictate to you what's important for you to prioritize and get done in your life. It's nobody's life but yours.
So when you now I see that you got this. The question comes to my mind, did you learn this from your parents? From because usually I know the patterns, the way we operate in life goes from generation to generation. So you learned this from
Mhm.
your parents, or you kind of learn this on your own?
You mean when you say you got this, like feeling like I've got it?
Yeah, because you like the calendar, because when I'm listening to it, like, you're
Yeah.
doing things you love, you're very productive, you have the calendar, you don't waste your time, obviously. So it
Mhm.
appears to me like you know how to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it's learned, like, some of it I had a great environment with my parents to learn some of those things. And growing up, I also have a wife who's tremendous and amazing and helps me, on many of those things. Um, so I don't want to give the false sense that like I always have it. So I want to be clear about that, because most of it's been trial and error though, and just being real with myself, and having a high self-awareness to say, this isn't working for me. Right? Something's off, or something's not working. The way I typically say it with entrepreneurs is it shows up in burnout, blowout, or rust out. Right? Am I burning out because I'm exhausted all the time? I don't feel like I'm being productive. Okay, what has to change? Is it my routine? Is it my energy? Is it what I'm eating? Is it like I'm always self-assessing those things. You know, is it blowout, meaning all of a sudden I blow up one day and I'm upset about something? Well, that's a symptom of something that's been there for a while. What is it? Am I being honest? Am I communicating well to others? Am I just overwhelmed and I'm not telling anybody? And then rust out is when I'm just really not like, when I start to determine that I'm just not interested in this anymore, or interested in this thing. Why is that? And so I'm constantly looking at that. I'm always trying to be realizing that me as a physical human is the greatest asset of my business, of my life, and my family, and just creating those priorities. And so for me, I think part of it's been learned, but or shown to me, but also part of it's just been trial and error and being real with myself. Going, I've had phases of life where I lost businesses. You know, my marriage was pretty tough at that point. We had 5 little kids. I lost a business, and it just became, how can I be honest with myself of what's working and what's not? And when I see things that aren't working, I have to approach it. I think the problem for a lot of people is they try to push through it, or they hide it, or they set it aside and pretend it doesn't exist. That's what's causing the stress, because I gotta. No, if you got a concern, pick up the phone and call that person right now. Let's get through it. Let's work through these issues. And also, Lolita, the other thing I would say as an overarching thing, most things aren't as as worrisome as we like to think they would be anyway. So part of that is me just getting older and wiser in some ways. I hope that I'm letting a lot of that stuff go that maybe 10 years ago would eat at me all day. It just is, and I let it go. So I don't want to pretend that I have it all figured out. I just do know that there are a lot of things that are working for me, and I just try to really protect those things that work.
So you mentioned that there were some times and some, you know, difficulties in your life that lost a business, and many times when I look at successful people, um, there's always like, oh, there was a before story, and then they're
Uh-huh.
successful, and we don't really know what's happened in the middle. And I'm very interesting to hear, and I would like you to share with me what is that you do when you were in that stressful situation. How did you get out of that? Did you implemented some techniques? What was your path out of it?
Um, yeah, if I look back at that time, just to give context, I mean, we had just had our youngest two children. They're twins, and so we had 5 children in 7 years. Really tough. I mean, so the oldest is 7, the youngest are newborns, 3 in diapers. And my wife's working as a nurse. I've got a business that 3 years prior we were making great money to the market changes. I've got 7 companies, franchises that we're part owners in, and it was just like it was crushing us, right? I mean, it was like to the point where I just told somebody this morning that when I would hear a truck back up and you'd hear that beeping sound in the neighborhood, I'd run up to my window to see if they were taking my car because like I just was behind on everything and I couldn't figure out how to get ahead. And it was really, really tough. And yeah, there was a lot of times. I mean, I had family and friends that could tell, and they would come to me like, "Are you all right? Like, I know you're going through a lot." And physically, I was just not able to do all the things that I wanted to do. And I sort of had to stop and say, "Look, if I don't take care of me, if I don't understand what's important, if I don't protect the things that are important, meaning me, my sanity, my health, my sleep, my all of those things, uh, my relationship with my wife and my children, my little children at that time, they could take everything. They could take my house, my cars, my everything, but they can't take my sanity, my health, and my family unless I let it happen." And so I had to just get really aware and sort of say to myself, I've got to do all things to protect that. And that took a lot of conversations in that stressful time. I think a lot of times stress comes because um, we're holding on, right? It's like I heard this great analogy, if I can share it with you, Lolita, that and it's been a story I tell. I actually tell it to a lot of teens that I help because one of the other things I do is I run an entire congregation for my church too. I've been doing that for 5 years. So aside from all the other stuff I do that as well. Um, and in that, one of the things that I do is I counsel youth, and I tell this story to them, and it seems to resonate well. But and I can't remember. I'd love to give credit where I heard it, and I cannot remember. I heard it so long ago that I don't remember. But it's these three monks who are walking down the side of a riverbank, and during their first year, they're sworn to a couple of things. The short story is they're sworn to silence. They need to meditate and be in silence. They're not allowed to interact with anyone of the opposite sex, right? And especially no physical touch. So they're walking. The three of them are walking down the side of this riverbank, and a woman is trying to cross this river, this stream, and she falls, and the water's moving fast enough that as she tries to cross and tries to stand up, it keeps knocking her down, and she's struggling, and she yells for help. And without hesitation, one of them runs down into the water, picks her up over his shoulder, carries her across, sets her down, and asks if she's okay. She says, "Yes, thank you, I'm fine." And then he walks over and joins the other two, and they continue to walk down the path. And this path is long. They're walking about a mile. And so they get a mile down the path. And the whole time they're walking, one of the other monks is like, he's furious in his mind. He's like, "I can't believe he did this, you know?" And so after about a mile, they stop and he says, "I can't take it anymore." And so he now breaks his silence, right? He said, "I can't take it anymore." He said, "You broke every rule that we agreed to. You walked down, you picked her up, you physically touched her, put her over your shoulder, you spoke to her, then you carried her and you set her down. And then you just continued on your way." And he says, "You're right, I did. But that's where I left her. But you've been carrying her the last mile." Make sense? And so often we unduly carry something with us that we don't need to be carrying. And so often with young people, I'll say, you know what, there might be an issue they're talking to me about. And I'm like, is that true? Do you need to keep carrying this? Have you moved past it? Yes, I have. Then move past it. In fact, when you walk out of here, leave it over there in the corner. Like physically, I want you to think about leaving it right there in the corner and walk out the room and you've left it here. I'll keep it here. It'll be in a box over here in the corner. You can come back for it anytime. But we just do that. We just carry stuff that's stories and things that just aren't helpful to carry. And so I think for me, one of the things I've tried to do is learn from the past, right? I love the book by Dr. Hardy, The Gap and the Gain, because when we're comparing ourselves to our past and the future we haven't yet achieved, we live in this gap. But when we look back only to see how far we've come, then we live in the gain. And so it's like really important to go, let me leave that. Yes, I lost a business, right? Okay, but I learned a lot from that. That doesn't define me. I don't need to add more stress to my life by creating an identity around that. Let me leave that there. And I just found for me that's been helpful. I'm not always perfect at it. Sometimes my wife will have to remember, hey, go leave that back in the past. There's no need to bring that forward, right? It just is not helpful. Um, and so that story has served me really well.
Well, thank you for sharing. I love that story. I recommend. I heard that a question is like if you are in some situation and you worry or stressing out about it, ask yourself, will that matter in 5 years?
Yeah. The other thing to ask is it true? Because a lot of times the story we're telling ourselves isn't even true. I just had this with my kids. They're coming in talking about a coach and one of the challenges that they're having. And I'm like, huh, is that true? Like, well, yeah, this, and this. I'm like, no, I know, but you said it this way. So did they actually do that? Well, no, they said this. I know, but what was their intention, right? And you start digging through it, and it's like, was that actually true? Is that actually what happened? Because we tend to make it up a little bit in our heads sometimes.
I noticed when I started my healing journey, and I realized that a lot of it, the, a lot of my stress I was causing to myself. And it really came because my dad was an alcoholic.
Hmm.
So I grew up in a very anxious environment and I was catastrophizing everything. It's like if somebody, and I remember I was, while I was still working in this small company, if they will go and close the door in the boss office, I will think, oh my gosh, you're talking about me.
Yeah.
Makes no
Yeah.
sense, you know. But I think a lot of there are a lot of people who did not grow up in the environment. They have very supportive parents, and you said you had great parents that were always there for you. Which I met your parents at the Connective and in Florida, which and you
Yeah.
have an amazing sister, and so you have amazing, beautiful family and your kids and your wife, and but you know what? Somebody who's listening in and they say, well, that's easy for you when you have that support system already in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of self-worth really coming from from our childhood. That and what would you say to somebody who does not have a very good support system and how they can believe in themselves?
Yeah, first off, thank you for saying that. And I do. I'm very blessed. So I don't want to give off any like I've had a blessed life. And and yet, a lot of what the example of a blessed life is because I have created it by design. Yes, I have great parents, and there's not a lot obviously I could do about that, but I can in terms of how we relate to each other and our relationship and the things that we involve each other with. I can make that great today. Like there's some people that grew up in great homes and they have no relationship with their family because they choose to have it that way. And so what I would say to anyone is you get to design the life you would like. And again, that sounds cliche and it sounds like, yes, Chaz, but you don't understand my situation. Or I totally understand that. But I will tell you, um, your present right now, the way you look at everything is how it defines it. Meaning your past doesn't even define you. It's the present view of the past is what defines you. Dr. Hardy talks about this again in his book. And one of the things that he mentions, his father, I believe it was like a drug dealer, alcohol, like he went to foster home, all these things. And he said, I could let that define me, or I could create a new reality of it in my present. And he's now got a beautiful family. I think he has 7 children. He adopted 4. he's a, New York Times, how many times best-selling author, all this stuff. But somebody could look at his situation and say, it wasn't ideal. He didn't grow up in the right, they could compare he and I in our two situations. So I just say that to say, you get to decide and design that life. And that might mean cutting out some people in your life. Look, there's people I've had in my life who I realized at some level, whether it's jealousy or resentment or whatever the feeling was, decided that they didn't want to treat me well anymore. And I'm not going to allow that. If you want to treat me like that, then you don't deserve the right to be in my life. I am incredibly protective of a few things. That is, to the best I can, my reputation, my businesses, and my family. And not in that order, probably the reverse order. My family first. To the point of this, I will just tell you, I have um, close relatives or relatives who maybe haven't treated me well or whatever it might be. They are not allowed to cross the threshold of my door in my home. Okay. Now, I don't say that to be mean. It's because I will protect with everything I have what walks through that door. Make that a physical or a metaphor of life. Some of us have a door wide open and we let anything come in and out of our life, and you have to stop that. I don't usually tell you you have to do, but that's something you have to do. You have to protect that, because if you're not going to protect it, no one else will. But you've got to protect that door, and it does not have to be open all the time, and you do not have to let everyone in. So just learn to be protective of that, and you can create your own story. It's your life to live. It's your story to create.
Everything starts with the boundaries.
Yeah.
And
Lolita,
have
I will say, let me say one other quick thing though. But what's the reverse side of that, right? Because I don't want to come off in any. I'm very real. I'm very transparent. I'm very disciplined. And yet, here's something else though. Because of that, because there's a little bit of that protective wall, if you're looking at a visual, that also means I have very few people inside that wall, right? So for me, sometimes I see other people and I think, man, I they have a ton of connections, a ton of friends. They're always hanging out on weekends with their friends and they have big friend group and all this stuff. And so for me, sometimes I see that and I think I could let jealousy creep in there a little bit and say, I'd love to have that because I have a really small but tight group of people that I trust, I honor, I respect, I celebrate them, they celebrate me. But outside of that, it's not. I have a lot of connections. I have a lot of people I know. So that's the flip side. So you just have to decide the trade-off for me, because I don't know how, and maybe that's just me, it's my own limiting belief of how I could have that many close, tight relationships, because I don't know if I could give that attention to them the way it would deserve, if that makes sense. And so that's a trade-off. So I just want to be clear, like, I don't have a ton of close connected friends as maybe others might see. I have a lot, but others might see like, wow, you don't have as many as many other people do, and that's okay for me. I'm okay with that.
I think the biggest question is like, now, this is the end of a year, and I was looking back, and by the way, on our meeting, Master Networks, we were talking about the end of a year,
Mm.
and I realized that I spent so much of time and energy towards events or towards people that I realized that didn't bring me anything. So those who listening in, I'm thinking, we before we get into new project, into new relationship, and anything new or new habit, we always need to ask ourselves why. Why am I doing? Is it because I want to please other people? Because I want to be likable? And then if I want to be likable and please people, then I need to ask why do I need to have that validation, and then can work on ourselves and healing and all of this, because there's only that little time of how much we have in our day. And I remember I had a dream a long time ago that I was told that I'm going to die tomorrow, and
Yeah.
I thought, gosh, what a shame. I'm like, I felt so sad, not that, not like I'm going to die, but I thought to myself, this is so sad, because I thought I have all this time and I need to start doing things. There was so much I needed to do still. And I still remember that feeling. So now when I think about the things that I'm wondering about, should they get into, I think to myself, do I really want it? And if I really want it, I need to go for it, because was it Les Brown said that the richest place in the world is the cemetery with all the dead
Yep.
dreams.
Yep.
And
They go to die. Yeah.
so we need to really do what we want to do and allow ourselves to do that. But at the same time, we need to ask why we're doing that, because we need to know what the values and the goals are, and are those truly ours? I think for those who are wondering, like, well, how will I know? Is like, does it make you feel good? If it makes you feel good, is it brings the energy up? Like, we were talking about writing and being productive. If that makes your heart sing, that's the right way to go it, and go do it.
Yeah, it's so true because like either I'm gonna be part of my own plan or I'm gonna be part of somebody else's, right? And so there's times where I'm part of somebody else's plan, but it's only those typically that are important to me, right? And that's where I think prioritizing, we're often good at prioritizing tasks, but we're not good at prioritizing people. And because it sounds so bad, it sounds like, no, I love everyone. Yeah, that's fine. But you can't treat everybody the same. You have to have a prioritization of people because of the limited time you have and the limited impact you can make. And so I've just been very disciplined in that of just prioritizing people. But I love what you had the way you said that.
I know we can talk about that forever, but I want to spend a little bit time before we close on today conversation. I remember when Michelle Hammonds, and by the way, for those who like, who is she? You need to go back to my podcast and the first episode that I did in inviting anyone to speak on my podcast. It was her, and you totally go and listen to her interview. She told me, she said, okay, Lolita, you need to belong to this group. And I immediately said, no. I'm like, I already been to so many networking events, so I'm belonging to so many BNI and all kinds of, and again, this is just my personal opinion. Everybody had their own, groups that they belong to,
Sure.
and it's all about the people. So it's not about the names, about the people and what's happening inside there. And
Love it.
but when Michelle said, no, this is an amazing group of people, but also she said there will be a lot of value for me that has to do with training and connections and all this. So I would love if you will share a story. Why did you create the Master Networks?
Yeah, thank you. So I started it in 2011, so it's been a good run. But really, it started because it kind of started accidentally, which like a lot of businesses do. But I was part of a networking group. I'd been part of it for 10 years. And it was during the time that I just talked about when we had our twins or with five little kids, and one of them needed some surgery and stuff. And I went to the hospital and anyway, taking care of my wife and all that stuff. And I got a letter from them that said, "Hey, you've missed two meetings, you're out." I was like, God, 10 years. Nobody checked on me. And again, I'm not blaming anybody. It just is what it is. I knew the rules too, but I was focused on family life, things that were in front of me that were a higher priority. And and so I thought, well, I'd built my company up to that point through networking, through connections, through people. So I thought, well, forget this. I'll go start my own thing. And I just literally did. I just started a networking group and I didn't go after the people of that group. I just started my own. I started attracting people, but the way I wanted to do it based on a couple things, being relational, not transactional. That was most important for me. Right. Number two, I wanted it built on education because if we could build each other up as better business people, better humans, better leaders, we could make a bigger impact in the world. And I think we could stick together and it would stick and stay. And so I just started and it started to attract people left and right, like totally fast. And it was crazy. And then all of a sudden I went, the same time the other business was kind of falling apart because of the market and some bad partners and stuff. I thought, this might be a business. This might be something. Right. And I went to my wife and I said, hey, I know business over here is falling apart, but I want to start a new one. And to her credit, she's like, I believe in you. Now we made an agreement of where it needed to get in a certain period of time where I needed to go do something different, but she supported me. And so that's an important thing if you're in business or you've got a spouse, like being on the same page is so important. And part of that is just honest conversation. I could talk about that for a long time. But we just started Master Networks and it started to grow. And here we are, 13 years later, and thousands of members, hundreds of chapters in multiple countries, and impacting the lives of entrepreneurs. And so it's just been a tremendous run. And I love meeting new people like you and others. And it's just been fascinating to see that we're all, as business owners, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to grow a business, support people, support ourselves. and we don't need to do it alone, right? We can do it together. And that's what Master Networks is.
Um, I remember the first time that I saw the bond method.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, that's genius. Because of course I love that every letter means something because like I have a count process. I love those little abbreviations, especially not in, English is not my first language. So when
Mhm.
I have abbreviation, it reminds me of something that it's easier for me to know. Would you mind explaining what the bond method
Sure.
is?
Yeah. So the bond method, it was really interesting how it came about. I kept having this guy reach out to me to connect, and I was like, I'm busy. I can't, I just, he's a banker. Anyway, long story short, he invites me to lunch. My assistant's like, just go because he's going to call me next week and the week after. So I do. I go. We have lunch. We go to Chipotle. Um, we're in line getting a burrito or a taco or some whatever it was, and we sit down. And he grabs a bottle of hot sauce, right, and he goes to shake it on the hot sauce, and he sets the bottle down. And when it hits the tray, it spills towards me and squirts hot sauce all over me. By the way, side note to the story, I've told the story hundreds of times. I've left this out. That was the first day I wore that suit I had on. It was brand new. I'd never worn it before, which added to the frustration. So I leave, I'm getting ready to leave. And as we're walking out, he says those magic words. He says, "Oh man, we should do this again sometime." And I'm like, "Not on your life, man. Not this was," he talked about cars the whole time we were there. I'm not a car guy. There was nothing in common. We had no connection. I was just so frustrated. He didn't even offer to clean my suit, nothing. So I get in the car and I call my team and I was like, "Hey, I'm headed back to the office. We need to talk about this because I've been connecting with people for all these years. I'm sure his boss said go out and network, and he didn't even know what that meant. And for all these years, I'm like, I need to codify what I've been doing because I build relationships like that." And so I felt like a divine download. I literally sat in front of a whiteboard with my team and we built Bond in probably less than 10 minutes as an acronym. Like we knew what we were doing, we just had to break it down so people could remember. So B is build on a common interest, which means had he walked in there and said, "Hey, I understand you have kids, you have twins. Like, tell me about that." Or if he had twins or he had kids, or, "Hey, we're both from the same city." Whatever it is, you learn to build on things in common. If you don't, that connection takes a long time to start. You don't feel like you're on the same. So you got to build connection, right? So build on common interest. Then O is occupation exploration, meaning now let's go into your business. Now tell me about what you do. Think about last networking event you went. There's even speed networking, which is fine, but that's so transactional in its nature. It's like, here's what I do. What do you do? Okay, great. Doesn't fit. Okay, next. It's like, no, swipe left, swipe. It's just so stupid to me. We got to build connections. I'd rather go to a networking event and connect with two people in an hour than 25. Like, yes, I understand there's volume and connection, but I want to go deep. I want to know these people. I want to see if there's something there. So build on the common, then go occupation. Then it's needs discovery is the end. Now tell me, now that I know who you are, what you're about, how you started your business, what you do, et cetera. Now tell me about the needs that you have. Then once I've got that, based on everything I know, we can move to D, which is develop an opportunity. That opportunity could be for you and me, or you may say based on needs, you need to connect with a CPA. And I'm like, "Oh, I know somebody. Let me connect you two together." That method has allowed me, now this sounds very arrogant. I don't mean it to be, but I just am proving a point. It has allowed me to connect with billionaires, millionaires, actors, athletes, business people, like, and connect with them fast. And they'll say, "Chaz, I feel like a friend. I feel like I've known you for a long time." I mean, there's a lot of people I could pick up the phone. And again, maybe not the tight friend that, I could crash on their couch kind of a thing, maybe, but many of them at a really high level I've built relationships with that I could pick up the phone and ask for anything because I've used this method. And so it's served me and thousands of entrepreneurs very well over the last decade.
Thank you for sharing. Um, I'm listening to this and I just realized something. I'm a big fan of masterclass. You
Yeah.
go online and you
Yeah.
listen. And I just listened to two episodes. Actually, that's all there is, only two episodes of CIA intelligence. I forgot what the class name is, but there were three CIA agents that they were talking about how to negotiate and
Mhm.
deal with people and the communication, all this. And they said that you have to have empathy. You need to listen to the person, uh, do less talking. But they said you need to talk their language. But the first thing was like be personal and
Yeah.
really ask them questions that you're showing that you're interested in them as a person. Because when you are touching that personal side, even if they CIA whatever equivalent in North Korea, they will feel like, hey, you're my friend, I'm feeling safe with you, which is
Yep.
really goes into right into our brain of feeling, hey, if you're not my enemy, we're safe, we're friends. So everything starts from relationships and feeling and with that. So I love that.
Yeah, it works. And you think about people who, especially people who are high profile, athletes, actors, actresses, those people like they want to connect with people on a human level. Everyone around them always wants something from them, whether it be an autograph, whether it be, an opportunity, they want something from them. So when you come in, no agenda, not wanting anything, but build on common interest and use the bond method. And many times develop opportunity doesn't come for me for years, like years sometimes, right? If at all. And so I go through the bond method and there may not be any development opportunity. And man, it's just allowed me to connect with so many people really quickly when others like, oh, how did you get to them? I don't know. I had a conversation, like just talk to them as a human without wanting anything from them.
I think what also I like about this method when we asking someone else about what they like, what their families like, we humans, we love stories.
Mm,
And we remember other people and teaching through the stories. So I think if I even go and I have a meeting with someone, and we start with on a personal note and we talk about things, at least I had a good conversation. I left with some story, and even if it does not even develop to some sort of business, I still had a good time and still exchange energy. And that's also very important because they can give me some message or inspiration to me that has nothing to do with business, but they can
yes.
support me on the personal level.
Yeah, so true. And you think about like who in their life, many people don't have anyone in their life that's asking them deep questions about what they want to accomplish, what are they trying to do, what's important to them. And so when someone sits down and they do that, they're like, man, this person really cares because they're asking genuine questions. Like I love when I'm in front of, like, let me think of a good example. Like an athlete, right? Especially somebody that's maybe been retired. They were like, I have had Hall of Fame football players. Anyway, everyone wants to talk to them about that time of their life because that's what they're known for. So think about that. If you sort of just talk to them and say, like, what are you working on now? Oh, well, I'm doing that. Awesome. What do you hope to accomplish? What are your goals? What are the things that's the thing they're actively pursuing right now. That's the thing and everyone else misses it. I've been in groups where like 10 people around and they're all, hey, when you caught that pass and you did this thing, and they're like, yeah, and you could just tell like there's no energy because like that was 20 years ago. But here's what I'm doing now, right? Here's what I'm doing in life now. Anyway, it's just a small, simple example. Like think about that, right? Think about how to care about people. And this is a skill, I believe. You can learn to connect with others. It's a high level skill that will separate, especially as more technology, more AI, all the things are coming out. Those are great. They have their place, but we will still drive for that human connection. And your ability to do that is actually a great stress management tool for other people, right? When you can sit down, I just did this morning. I had breakfast with somebody and we meet every month. And he's like, man, I just appreciate you listening to me. He's like, I don't have anywhere else I can go to talk about this stuff. So it's a skill set that's going to separate you when you can learn it.
I know we don't have much time left, but I would you spill the beans a little bit about your upcoming book, please?
For you, Lolita, I absolutely will. Thank you, by the way. It's so I've written two books. One was on business called 5+1. It's the entrepreneur's formula for success. Then I wrote a book called Now Make Good, which has to do with leadership development. And I realized something over the years. I realized that I could help people be successful in business. I've coached hundreds of people. I've taught thousands, tens of thousands of entrepreneurs. But I noticed something that would happen is they all wanted to make an impact in the world. Every time I ask a business owner, when you started your business, why? I want to change the world. I want to make an impact. And I would say, cool. How do you do that? Like, no answers, like, or a vague attempt. And so we started to interview some of the most impactful business owners in the world. And we started to notice some themes. And so this book is called The Impact Effect. And I'm a very pragmatic, model-based, show me a model, I can follow it, I can do, this idea. And so we break down in model form three components that help them make an impact. One is the professional growth and expansion. One is the personal development, and the third is the relational development, and how they've mastered the game in all three of those to make the biggest impact ever. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to learn how to make an impact, stay tuned. In fact, just before we recorded this, like 10 minutes before, I just got sort of kind of final stuff to get this book done. So it's coming soon.
Wow, so exciting. And by the way, for those who are listening and they hear impact, Chaz has an amazing event every month, isn't it? It's called
It's every
Impact
month.
Day.
First Thursday
And
of every month. It's you can go to attendimpactday.com. It's free for right now and probably forever, but right now it's free. Attendimpactday.com, and I bring people where we'll talk about professional growth, relational, and personal growth, and we'll talk about all three pillars for success. It's 2 hours, 10 a.m. to noon Central, first Thursday of every month.
and of course, you all have a link below to go and attend this for sure.
Awesome,
And
thank you.
also, I know you have an online membership or something like that, where you have a community, right?
Yeah, so I have Master Networks. You can join our network at masternetworks.com. Then if you follow me on any social, there's a link to my impact community, and you can learn more there. I also talk about that at Impact Day, but those are the two communities that I build, both for entrepreneurs and business leaders. And our goal is just to make an impact in this world because, as you mentioned, we all have a short time on this earth. One of the activities I do with people in my impact, I speak on stages all over, is I have people list out their parents and then their grandparents and then their great grandparents. And by the time I get to great grandparents, you'd be surprised that less than 5% of an audience can actually name their parents or grandparents and their great grandparents. They can't even name them. So think about that. 95% of the room cannot name them. So the question I ask entrepreneurs is, in 2 generations or 3 generations from now, will anyone even know you existed? Will you live in such a way that your legacy and your impact lives beyond in your lineage, that people go, oh yeah, my great grandfather was this person. You know what I mean? Like if and so when we stop and we think about it, in 2 or 3 generations from now, are they going to forget me? Are they going to even know I lived? That changes my perspective on how I approach every activity I'm doing so that I can make such a lasting impact that I can bless generations um, of my great grandkids and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's what the impact effect is about.
Well, I cannot wait to see what's coming up next, and I'm just super excited to see everything that you do and participate as much as I can. Sadly, our time is up, so so thank you so much for being the part of this, and I'm looking forward to your book, to the more projects that you're working on, and like I'm always happy to see you on our everyday Wednesday call. So thank you so much, Az.
Thanks, Alita. It was an honor.